Hey everybody, this is Neil Pasricha, and welcome back to chapter, are you ready for it? 93 of 3 books. You are listening to our 14-year-long pilgrimage to uncover and discuss life's biggest themes through the 1,000 most formative books in the world. On the exact minute of every single new moon and every single full moon, because we don't trust the Gregorian calendar around here, we are dropping a brand new chapter of 3 books. We're touching and grasping and searching. We're curious people trying to learn more about how to live our best and most intentional lives. Who are we talking to? Who are we hanging out with? We're talking to everyone. Authors like Brené Brown back in January, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino over in July, like restaurateurs like Zafar the Hamburger Man just a few chapters ago, and today, we are hanging out at the kitchen table of, I think it's safe to say, well, I don't want to say that, one of the most famous astronauts in the world. Commander Chris Hadfield has lived for 6 months in outer space. Okay? 6 months he's lived in a weightless fashion. And while he was on U.S. shuttles, while he was helping build the Russian space station Mir, while he was the commander of the International Space Station, he wasn't just hanging out doing experiments. He was serving in this incredible global capacity as an educator, making YouTube videos, recording a cover of David Bowie's song Space Oddity. You've probably seen it. 100 million people have seen it. First music video ever recorded in space, perhaps unsurprisingly. I don't think Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin pulled off a music video while they were out there. Okay, and not many people have been out there, so it's the first music video ever recorded in space. He beams all this stuff over to his social media, so if you don't follow Chris Hadfield on social media, you absolutely should. Wonderful images from outer space, beaming them back. Millions and millions of people follow him. He comes back from outer space, and they invite him to come up on the TED stage and tell everybody what he learned, and he talks about fear. Did you know while he was doing one of his spacewalks, out of the space station, kind of crawling around and all the equipment flying around it there, he goes blind. He goes blind while doing the spacewalk. Some weird gas gets released in his spacesuit. It blinds him in one eye. It fills his eye with tears and dirt, and then all the tears and dirt, because it's in space and there's no gravity, don't fall out of his eye. They just kind of leak over to his other eye. Now he's blind trying to do this. So that's a crazy TED Talk. Over 10 million people have watched the TED Talk. If you want to learn the difference between fear and danger in your life, I highly recommend Chris Hadfield's TED Talk, and we'll put a link to that over in the show notes over at 3books.co. And in addition to being all this stuff, kind of like every young kid's dream, he's an astronaut, he's a rock star, he's a musician, he's a famous speaker, he's doing all this stuff. He's also like, just to make us feel a little bit worse about ourselves, I'm just kidding. He's a very, very, very gentle, humble, kind of the earth man. But he's also a writer, okay, on top of everything else. In addition to everything else, he's also a writer. 2013, he puts out An Astronaut's Guide to Life, one of the most popular memoirs released in the last 10 years. Bestseller for 3, 4, 5 straight years. International bestseller, translated into like dozens of languages. He follows it up with a picture book called The Darkest Dark, which my kids love because it teaches them how to not be afraid of the dark. So if you got a kid who's afraid of the dark, this is a wonderful picture book called The Darkest Dark. And now he's just put out a novel. Is there anything Chris Hadfield can't do? What's next? Is he going to compete in the Olympics in ballet or something? I mean, he can do anything. And this is kind of cool, right? Because you're like, how does someone learn to do anything? Obviously, you got to be like psychologically taught and physically taught to kind of be an astronaut. The sort of NASA space program sort of filters everybody out except the sort of perfect specimens of Earth. They get like 35 applications, and everyone's great to be an astronaut, and they end up picking 6 people to be one, right? So Chris is kind of one of those people that's kind of picked and picked and picked. So we know he's awesome, but how does he learn how to write The Apollo Murders? His brand new novel that just comes out, storms the bestseller list like all of his books do. Up in Canada, it's a Heather's Pick here, so it's at the front of all the Indigo bookstores. all the Kohl's bookstores. Shout out to Kohl's bookstores. If anybody else grew up with the Kohl's bookstores like I did over in Oshawa, Ontario, shout out to the 5 Points Mall. And in addition to that, how does he learn how to be a novelist? How does he study art and learn how to create it? How does he challenge himself to kind of pull this off? How does he live a long, healthy life? I started noticing as I was researching Chris Hadfield and the other astronauts he talks about, most of them live into their 90s. Right? Buzz Aldrin, who I mentioned, he's alive and well, 93. Jim Lovell, alive and well, 93. What is up with these astronauts living so long? So we got to talk about that. We got to talk about kind of physical fitness, physical upkeep, how we take care of ourselves. What will the future of space travel look like in our lifetime and in our children's lifetime? We're not just speculating over chicken wings at some danky kind of tavern with people, that we're not just hanging out and saying, what do you think's going to happen? Would you ever go to? We're talking to Chris Hadfield about it. And he as you listen to this conversation, he's going to put it in perspective about how 70,000 years ago, some people thought you should never leave Africa, and then some people did. And how 18,000 years ago, some people thought you should never cross the Bering Strait Bridge, and then some people did. And now, 50 years ago, some people thought you should never fly out to outer space and try to colonize the moon, and now some people are doing that. And what does it look like from here? What does it look like from here? He says that the moon is going to be like another continent in our lifetime. That's what it's going to feel like kind of settling in North America if you weren't from North America 1,000 years ago, right? We're also, as you can imagine, going to talk about Chris Hadfield's 3 most formative books. What inspires someone to do the things that he's done? What can we learn from those books? What can we take away from them? We're going to do all this from the pleasure of Chris's kitchen table. We interrupted him signing all of his Christmas cards. He said he was sending out like 1,000 Christmas cards, piles of Christmas cards, hand signing, hand writing. And he says it allows him to pause and stop and feel a connection with every single person in his life. Okay, I'm going to be in your left ear, I think. Chris is going to be in your right ear. You're going to be hanging up between us. Just so you could picture the scene, the kitchen table is like a white marble. There's like a thin wooden, hardwood, planky floor. There's a whole bunch of succulents by the wall. There's snow falling up the window, and there's a big painting of bulldogs behind Chris. As his 5-month-old puppy, New Henry, is going to be barking and hanging out between us as well. I want to welcome you into the very last chapter of 2021. And as we do, I want to encourage you both, A, to check out the Apollo Murders, Chris Hadfield's new book, which I think is wonderful. I'm on page 183 now. It is gripping. It's a wonderful thriller. And I want to remind you that in just a few days, we are going to be releasing our best of 2021. So stick around if you want a reflection of this entire year, this entire wild and crazy, wonderful year that we've had together. Thank you, 3 Bookers. Thank you, Cover to Cover Club members. Thank you, Paper Cutters, for being here and for going on this wild and wonderful ride with me, and today with the wonderful Commander Chris Hadfield. Let's go. Okay, I just hit record. Hi, Chris.
Hello, Neil. Good to be talking with you.
Great to be talking with you, and thank you so much for having me here in your kitchen.
It's a good place for a couple authors to be sitting on a cold December day.
Yeah, it's snowing out the window here. I see lots of beautiful plants. Are you a plant?
My wife is. I grew up on a farm, so yeah, I'm very much an agricultural kind of person. My wife likes buying plants, but she's not all that keen on watering plants. So it's a team effort. But as you can see, the plants are thriving. So we're doing well.
She's the buyer, you're the waterer, and I feel like I'm just getting to know plants. I'm seeing like succulents, right?
Yes. Succulents are forgiving. So yeah.
Yeah, right. Because somebody sent me like a gift of a succulent for my birthday a year and a half, and it's still kicking.
Yeah,
still kicking. It's a gift that keeps giving.
It's a lot easier to have a green thumb with a succulent, for sure.
And then I caught you in the middle of signing Christmas cards, which my wife Leslie and I are doing the same thing right now. It's funny how the Christmas card has persevered.
Well, it's a nice personal touch, especially in a year where personal touches have been difficult. And it gives me a chance for each card to think about that person and write something for that person. But as you can see, I'm just on the letter A, and there are 25 more letters to go. And
you know you have a lot of friends with X's and Y's and Z's. I'm assuming with all your
hopefully not, but it's traditional, and traditions exist for a reason, and I try and honor them, and it's really nice to be able to send Christmas cards.
Yeah, and I'm just internally smiling at the fact that all these cards say by airmail. on them too. So there's a
not everything is domestic. Yeah, I've traveled the world.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful like animal or family. There's a familial and an animal feeling. I can walk in, the dog runs up to me. There's a painting right behind you of dogs. Are those bulldogs?
Big bulldogs. We had a pug for a lot of years, and he resembled those dogs. He just passed away in March, and now we have new Henry, who's 5 months old. So, my wife and I are just about to celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
And we've been together since high school, so 46 years. And we have had dogs since before we got married. So, yeah, dogs have been an important part of life for us, and they continue to be.
Yeah, so with the dogs and the plants and the dedication, because I got to say, when I opened the Apollo Murders, I'm one of those people that always reads the acknowledgments and the dedication first. And, it says, to Helena, who hand-built the multicolored desk on which this book was written, as well as our entire life together.
Yeah, it's true. The desk is like a coat of many colors. It's beautiful. We have a little tiny old cottage built in 1896, and when I was setting out to write the Apollo Murder, she said, "You need a desk," and so she put together this desk and painted it in colors like nobody else would ever paint a desk.
She hand built the desk,
just like the dedication says, and painted it. And
I was picturing IKEA or something.
No, and that's where the Apollo Murders was written, on that rainbow-colored desk.
Wow. And so why is it, rainbow paint?
Well, it's individual lath boards, and each board is a different color, and it's great. It's beautiful. It's subtly inspiring to have multicolors right there underneath your hands. So my wife Helena is very eclectic and strangely organized, and yet at the same time bohemian in the things she's doing, and absolutely restless with energy and multi-career. And so she added a desk maker to her resume.
Desk maker could potentially be in your resume too, because you are a astronaut, you are a musician, you are a commander. You were telling, I know you very kindly wedged me into your busy day. You're doing work with I think an indigenous population at a military college after this. You're helping out with Virgin Galactic, you're helping out with SpaceX. Yeah. You're doing a lot of stuff, Chris. So why a novel? So the Apollo, by the way, I want to tell you, because I got the bookmark right in it. I'm currently on page 183, and I'm loving it.
There's lots more to go.
I'm kind of chalk in the middle of it. So what prompted novel?
I've always loved reading. I sort of discovered the library in, I forget, maybe grade 5 or so, and holy cow, what a resource!
Down in Sarnia?
No, my folks live on a farm in between Milton and Oakville. By then, I was born in Sarnia, but they moved closer to raise us on a farm closer to Toronto, and so I was going to a school down in Oakville, and W.H. Morden, and the library, and then the next school after that, and I just discovered what a mind-expanding experience it is to be able to go in and be part of other people's imaginations. And so it's been fascinating and instructive my whole life. And you can share ideas by writing a song or painting a picture or just talking. But writing down your ideas is sometimes it's more helpful for the other person, because it allows them to parse them in individual thoughts and words and think about them and interpret them, and they're not just whistling by. But obviously writing is a very personal act, and it helps you get your thoughts together too. And so all the books that I've done have been hugely instructional for me. But I thought, with the weird experiences that I've had, to walk in space and to command a spaceship and see the world the way that I've seen it, how do you properly share it so that people can get it, so that people can truly internalize the experience that you've had? And so I've done all those other things, and I've written factual books, but I thought, man, if I could write, if I had the skill within me to write a compelling fiction book, then you can allow your characters to just be themselves. And you could have multifaceted reactions to the same event, which then help, it's like if you shine a light around a thing, as you move the light around, you see that thing more clearly. And so if you have character reactions to things happening during a space flight, then it makes it more real, I think. And so
that's an interesting way to say it. Yeah,
I created the Apollo Murders partially as a personal challenge, but partially as one other way to try and share the incredibly lucky experience I've had of flying in space.
Yeah,
and so it's delightful to see the response that it's getting and the number of people that are reading it and learning from it and taking different things out of it.
On the bestseller list, James Cameron. I love the blurb. Andy Weir, The Martian's such a big, exciting journey into an alternate path. James Cameron's there, so it makes me think. As I'm reading this, I'm like, is this guy going to pick it up and turn it into a movie?
Yeah, James loves the book. In fact, James, I gave him a real early version of it, and he came back with 2 plot suggestions. James said, this is a great book, and I want to make it into a movie. I won't be able to for a few years, and so you need to get someone else to make it into a movie because you shouldn't wait. But there's 2 little tiny plot tweaks because he's been a screenwriter and a pretty successful movie
Alien,
maker.
Titanic.
Oh yeah, and Avatar, and all that. But I took those 2 little plot tweaks and I thought about them and discussed them with Elena and agreed. Yep, that's just being kinder to the reader, giving them a little nugget earlier, or to clarify something where they might have had disbelief rising in their mind. And so I'm happy to take.
And you can't tell us what they are because it might ruin the book for people.
I'm not going to, especially you're only on page 100 and whatever.
Good. So it wasn't like they happen on page 2 and 3.
No, but it's good to get sage advice wherever you can, and I'm just delighted. It's a bestseller all around the world. It's already in 13 languages after just 2 months.
Including Russian, I'm assuming?
Russian, yeah.
Because there's a lot of Russian in the book. And that's the other thing you were saying about the different characters. I'm like, there's elements of the story in Russian. There's the Russian space program I'm learning about.
Oh, and
there's the astronauts. The astronaut's prayer on page 166. Lord, please don't let me fuck this up. Which I'm like, Chris Hadfield would not have written that in a nonfiction instructional book. But in fiction, he can stuff in the astronaut's prayer.
And you say that prayer every time you're about to do something complicated and irreversible on orbit. And the way that you fulfill the intent of that prayer is through preparation and training and planning and study so that you're not just counting on rolling the dice. But yeah, it's a real thing. On my way to my first launch, the head of the astronaut office, we did exactly that in the Astrovan on the way out to launch. And he didn't invent the tradition, so I thought it was a pretty funny tradition, and it's one that existed at the time of Apollo.
That type of lore that really comes through the pages, and it's really beautiful. And I like that you say it's a bit of a personal challenge, because all the comments I look at on YouTube underneath, for example, the David Bowie video that you filmed from the space station are like, this guy's every person's dream. He's a rock star and an astronaut,
Yeah.
And I like that personal challenge part. So you got the college, you got the pandemic, you got the multicolored desk from your wife who hand built it. At the same time, Chris, lots of people listening to this are like, yeah, but I want to write a novel too. Can you just zoom in a little bit for me? Sorry, I just bumped my mic there. What's the process? What's your process to write a novel? Talk me through what are you wall and cue card guy?
Well,
How'd you do this thing?
Well, I think it's the first big question you want to ask yourself is, why am I writing this novel? Why am I writing this novel? Because some people write it because it's psychologically important to them. I want to be a person who can write a novel. And so if that's your objective, that's great, and that'll help set how you do it. Or if your objective is, I want to sell 10,000 books, or I want to sell 1 million books. Okay, well, that's going to change how you write a novel. Or I want to experiment with some facet of language or self-expression, and that's another reason to write a novel. And so I think it's important to establish within yourself, why am I doing this? Because it's a big undertaking. Why am I doing this thing? And then
start with why.
Yeah,
Martin Perlmutter is probably going to be listening to this, and he would be very happy as our mutual speaking agent to hear you.
Simon would be happy with that. But I think that's really important. And then next is, okay, so if you understand why you're writing this, then that'll probably help establish what sort of novel it's going to be. What sort of characters, what sort of what appeals to you? And in my case, I have always loved thriller, action fiction novels.
Yeah.
I just find them compelling. When I'm reading one, I can't put it down. When I'm reading a novel, I think the novel is failing if I can just set it down anytime and don't care. Because then it's like, hey, I'm not part of this story. It's just it's popcorn entertainment instead of really
Gripping.
really rich 3-course meal entertainment. And so I thought I want to write a thriller fiction. And I've lived in space for half a year and been around the world 2,600 times. And so I understand the huge cinematographic and compelling nature of what a space flight is like.
Yeah.
And I was inspired by the Apollo program. And so I just thought, man, a thriller fiction that is set at the end of the Apollo program and the height of the Cold War and all that stuff. And I don't know anybody who's written a really good novel in that moment. And so I thought, okay, that's where I'm going to set it. But now I've got a why, and I've got a sort of a set of bounds.
What's your why?
Well, my why is personal challenge. I want to see if I can, if I have the skill or can develop the skill, and then also to better tell the story and share the experience of spaceflight.
Right.
Those two are the big whys for me.
So you got the why, you got the setting.
And now it's a matter of, okay, I don't know how to do this. So I read Stephen King's book on writing, which is an excellent book, and I took some of James Patterson's master classes because I've taught a master class, so
they give you one free.
Yeah, they give me them all.
If you
for
make
free,
a master class, you get a free
access,
one.
Yeah,
and the Stephen King book on writing, by the way, Rich Gibbons earlier in this show had mentioned that as one of his 3 most formative books. So cover to cover club members, people that listen to every single chapter. We've talked about that book in detail. It's a wonderful writing book.
And you know what I found absolutely most helpful out of his book was the piece he included of his unedited writing. I mean, it was very frank and personal and process revealing, but he stuck in a section towards the end of his own unedited writing, and it was terrible. Like, it was lousy writing. It had some richness in it, but it was really clumsy and it needed work. And I was like, wow, I take such great comfort from that. Because if that's what his first draft looks like, then good. That's hugely enabling and forgiving for me on my very first hack through a topic or a sentence or a paragraph.
So you do the Stephen King book, you do the James Patterson masterclass.
And there's a lot of other stuff online too, where you can talk. Hey, Henry, you be
quiet. Is that new Henry?
That's Henry.
We're happy if new Henry's lads. Okay.
Yeah, Henry's 5 months old, and so he's got a bit of a cold, so he's sneezing a little. Yeah, you're a good boy.
I'm wearing my mask, so he doesn't need to.
Yeah. So I had a look at other people's online advice, and there's some YouTubes and stuff like that, but then I thought I should study at the feet of the masters. Who do I really consider the best in the genre? Who can write thriller fiction better than anyone? And so I picked out my favorites. I started with Arthur Conan Doyle and Edgar Rice Burroughs and Jules Verne, and then to Jonathan Kellerman and Lee Child and John D. MacDonald and Frederick Forsyth and Ken Follett. And I reread those.
Right.
And I didn't just reread them to get the story, but actually to understand how did they write these books and how did they craft it together. And,
how do they seduce the reader?
Well, but not just that. How do you attribute a sentence? Like if Bill said walk the dog, okay, how do you write that? I didn't even know how to punctuate that. Is there a comma? Or Bill turned, smiled, and said walk the dog, and then left the room. Okay, I don't know how to punctuate that. Or where do you anyway? So I had to learn all that and the different ways of doing it and how to palm the mystery, to keep it under wraps. And
the mystery, I like that.
And do you have an unknown bad guy or and what is how do you keep each chapter going? Is it the perils of Pauline? What's going to happen next? Anyway, I have to learn all that stuff. But once I started reading, that's when I also started writing. And mine's historical fiction set primarily in the spring of '73. So that then builds a structure you can't avoid. And so it's like writing a book about going through a maze.
Yeah.
Well, the walls of the maze aren't moving. So your story has to obey the walls of the maze and the dead ends and the realities.
Right.
And so then it was great because it's so much research. What actually happened on March 14th of 1973? What was going on in the world? Where was Nixon that day? What was Kissinger doing? What was Schlesinger doing? What was Al Shepard doing? What was Gene Kranz doing?
And a lot of these are characters in the book.
Those are all real people that obviously are in. It's an alternative history fiction.
Yeah.
So digging really deeply into the facts of what was going on, and then I laid out a storyline, and so I know I got my rough storyline. I've got the timing of it set. I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but I can sense that there's enough room in there for a lot of twists of plot. And there's all sorts of threads. And the more I dig into that particular time in history, the more I realize, wow, there's some really cool threads in here that are may or may not end up in the book. And then I just started pulling on each thread. And as I pulled on the thread and researched it, I wrote it as a chapter. Or sometimes that would become like 6 chapters. And it was a form of turning the research into part of the book. So that now I had all of these simultaneous stories happening.
So you're looking up things that really happened.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Then you're writing it out.
No, it's iterative. Like almost every sentence, I'm doing fact checking. Maybe I'll get through a whole paragraph without having to go check something, but probably not. And so the book is deeply factual. It is exactly what happened with real things and real events and real space stuff with a plot twisted in amongst all those things. Part of my objective is for people to learn more about space flight.
That's one of your 2 whys. Better tell the story and the personal challenges you achieved.
So people need to read the book. And a big part of writing a book is getting books into people's hands. And how do you do that? If you self-publish, how does someone who's not in your mailing circle, how do they even know you have a book?
Yeah.
And there are, I forget, it's like 200,000 books a year are written and published.
Well, more than that. Yeah,
and that's maybe just in the UK or something.
Yeah.
It's the numbers.
They say it's 1 million, 500,000.
Huge. So how do you get it?
How do you?
If one of your objectives is actually for people to read your book, step 1 is they have to know your book exists.
Yes.
So you have to market your book. You have to get on radio shows. You have to use social media. You have to get on television. You have to every single person you talk to, you have to say, hey, by the way, I just wrote a book and you might want to read it. And
stick a little flyer on all your Christmas cards.
But if you want, Eric, I'll have a look at my Christmas card. You'll be amused.
Okay, I'm looking at it now. It says Happy Holidays on the front. There's a clip art of Santa on a roof, and he's holding the Apollo murders in his hand
and then
with a sack full of the Apollo murders.
Look at the inscription.
Inside it says, 2021 slayed us, SLEIGHED hyphen Happy New Year.
The Apollo murders slayed us. Yeah. Anyway, so it's kind of funny way to do that. But yeah, if you don't care, like if you've just tried to be to write for just yourself or for maybe literary significance, then that's fine. And that's a good reason. But part of this for me was to have people read it and get it and participate in a space flight that way. So an enormous amount of work in just trying to spread the word that this book exists. And then you're hoping that the people who read it like it.
And tell other people about it.
Well, yeah.
As I'm doing right now. I'm on page 183, but for people listening, like this is look, I don't know anything about space. Nothing. Zero. Yeah. And I feel like I'm in the rocket ship. I feel like I'm in the space shuttle. I mean, it's wonderful. It's a wonderfully intoxicating view of what it feels like to be outside of the planet.
That's a lovely thing to say, and I worked hard to try and make it feel that way. So then, of course, you've got it, and there's going to be bad reviews and good reviews, and you've got to be big enough to understand that everyone, I sure don't like every book that's ever been written. Right. Why should everybody like a book that I wrote?
Exactly.
And so anyway, so that's my process. But then the last piece of that process is, what do you do next? And so starting in the springtime, actually, while I was writing the Apollo murders, I'm choosing characters that maybe have the capacity to be in a subsequent book.
Oh.
And like not just a one-shot book. Because when I read a book and the characters are compelling and the story's compelling and I get to the end, I want to know what did they do next?
Right.
And that's why you love a James Bond series or a Jack Reacher series. And so I chose my main protagonist and a couple of the other characters so that they had the possibility of recurring.
Right.
And part of the 60,000 words we cut out is sort of this next plot that makes sense. And so I've been working on the next book since July.
Oh, wow.
And
I'm Blue Origin Murders.
Yeah, no, I'm about 10,000 words into writing the next book, but more importantly than that, I'm way into research for the next book. I've taken research trips and I've got another one coming up next week. And we're planning to release the next in the series in the spring of 23.
Wow.
So that's where we're going next.
Okay, I'm very intimidated and in awe of both the process and the result. It's amazing. It's incredible. The book is masterful. I'm only halfway through. I can't wait to finish it. And you mentioned that part of the research was revisiting these greats. And one of the greats you mentioned, of course, Chris, is Jules Verne. Can we use that as a dovetail to get into your first formative book today?
Yeah.
Which is, of course, The Mysterious Island. I hope it's okay with you. I'll just do a quick 30-second background. I want to have the listener picture holding the book in their hand. So, if you were holding the book in your hand, it is called The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne, published in 1875 by Pierre Jules Hetzel in France and in Scribner in English. First as a serial in a magazine, then as a novel in 3 volumes. Jules Verne, born and died in France from 1828 to 1905. He's a French novelist, poet, and playwright, best known for Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Around the World in 80 Days. This is one of his later works. He is the father of science fiction, according to a number of different people, and the second most translated author of all time after Agatha Christie and before William Shakespeare. The cover is a large oil painting of 5 sailors desperately hanging onto the net of a broken hot air balloon, tossed in large foamy blue and white waves, with yellow, orange, and gray in the sky depicting a sunset, and the mood is grave. After hijacking a balloon from a Confederate camp, a band of 5 northern prisoners escapes the American Civil War. 7,000 miles later, they drop from the clouds onto an uncharted volcanic island in the Pacific. Dewey Decimal Heads fire this one under 843.8 for French fiction in the later 19th century. Chris, please tell us about your relationship with The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne, Verne.
First, father of science fiction, Jules Verne, something I learned recently. The father of spaceflight is a Russian named Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. And Tsiolkovsky loved reading Jules Verne, and Jules Verne inspired Tsiolkovsky to get into the mathematics and the science of spaceflight. But what's interesting is Jules Verne was inspired by James Fenimore Cooper, because he told these long, sort of interesting, rambling stories of settling of the American West. Ah. And so if you actually take it back one further, perhaps the father of spaceflight is strangely James Fenimore Cooper.
Well, I also found out in 1834, when Jules Verne was 6, he was sent to boarding school in Nantes. The teacher, Madame Salmon, was the widow of a naval captain who disappeared 30 years before. His teacher often told the students that her husband was simply shipwrecked as a castaway and would be returning home like Robinson Crusoe from his desert paradise. So,
all books come from somewhere, right? Yeah. So Mysterious Island, I really liked it growing up for a couple of reasons. One, it's very engrossingly told. Jules, he wrote in French, but it's translated well. And they actually, when they translated it, they sort of shifted a couple of the norms to a more sort of British audience than a French audience. But it reads quite well in English. And it was a great adventure story. Mm-hmm. And for me, the most interesting part of the adventure story was a human triumph over adversity. I just found it fascinating that these people were cast away in this place with nothing, and they used their own cunning and their own experience and their own intellect and their perseverance in order to thrive in this remote location, and to find ways to harness what was there in order to provide some sort of good and sustainable, civilized quality of living in this place, and do it in sort of a harmonic way with the environment that existed there at the time. It was really a big, grand adventure to me, but I found it, really interestingly human-centric, but also sort of inspiring of like, hey, I'm a naturally curious kid, and I like science, and I like engineering and such, and these guys just turned all that to their own advantage to create this little island paradise. And so to me it was quite pivotal, I think, in how I imagined maybe I could be when I grew up.
Right.
And when I chose to go into the military to serve Canada, it was partially because of the example of these people. And when I chose to study engineering, my grandpa was an electrical engineer, but those may as well have been words in another language.
Right.
What's an electrical engineer? I have no idea. So I chose engineering partially because of what it could allow people like this to do in a very harsh set of circumstances. And so I've always kind of viewed human decision making and human skills in transforming a situation to improve the quality of life in some sort of sustainable, paradise-seeking way. To me, that's a wonderful way to go through life.
Yeah.
And so I took that from Mysterious Island, and so I've reread it since then, and I just think it's obviously very much of a time. And it's not a book for everyone, and I think it's a book to read at a certain time of your life. Mm-hmm. But I'm really glad that I did.
I'm really glad you did too, because it lets me ask you about the future of travel and space travel, because you said they're so self-sustaining, they're cunning, right? With the knowledge of the brilliant engineer Smith, the five are able to sustain themselves on the island, producing fire, pottery, bricks, nitroglycerin, iron, a simple electric telegraph, a cave home, and even a seaworthy ship. In 2013, I heard you on the Joe Rogan podcast talking about what might be needed on the moon or in Mars for those places to become self-sustaining.
It's the same, right? We show up on the moon, and it's just a mysterious island. And so how are we going to do it? Do we have all the knowledge that we need? Do we have the socio-political systems that will allow us to thrive there? Can we behave as people or not? How do we avoid our darker nature? How do we do all that stuff? And gosh, I'm chair of the board of the Open Lunar Foundation, whose whole sole purpose is to try and figure out how can we peaceably settle the moon as a species. Because how we settle the moon is kind of how we're going to settle planets as our technology gets further. And we've lived with a pretty good example on the International Space Station for the last 21 years with a different set of laws than any country on Earth. So we can do it. And Antarctica is an interesting example. But I think the Mysterious Island is also, even though it's fictional, it also provides sort of a potential role model for how we're going to do those things. So yeah, there's a lot of fact in fiction.
And what is possible, Chris? Let's just say the 50 years of our lifetime, or maybe the 100 years of our children's lifetime. How far do you think we're going to get? And what are we going to see before?
There's no way to say. When I was born, no one had flown in space.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything we've done in human spaceflight has happened since I was a kid. So incredibly fast, if you look at it on that time scale. And people are impatient. How come we're not all living on Mars? Well, gosh, it's so new, and it's going at an accelerating pace. And it's always been throttled and limited by how good our technology is. And so when you ask me to predict the future, what you're asking me to do is predict invention. And it's really hard to predict inventions, But if you just look at the current trends, the vehicle that SpaceX is building under Elon Musk's leadership, Starship, it is going to be cheap, heavy lift to orbit, like transport trucks to the moon and back, and a 100% reusable spaceship. So in a far more sustainable way than we've ever done, and instead of a tiny little purpose-built vehicle taking 3 people barely to the moon and 2 down to the surface and back, now you can back up a huge Mayflower delivery van to the moon with tons and tons of stuff, or a dozen people if you want. And suddenly that changes the game and makes it possible that this is the time in history that we can start settling the moon. which sounds crazy and maybe unnecessary, just like every early settlement we have ever done anywhere on Earth. Why would we have ever left Africa 70,000 years ago? Why did we? And for most people, it would have been inconceivable. Why are you leaving? We have food, we have trees, we have water. Why are you leaving? We have everything we need right here. And we got problems right here that we need to solve. Why are you leaving here? It's a good standard question. But there's always a subset of us that is curious of what's over the next hill, and recognizing that there's more opportunity the more we spread, and so we didn't get to the Americas until 18,000 years ago as humans. We didn't get to New Zealand until 800 years ago as humans. We didn't get to Antarctica until a little over 100 years ago as humans. We didn't get to space until 60 years ago as humans. In each one of those were a big revelation and a big new bunch of opportunities. So I think as the transportation costs radically drop and the safety goes up, it's just there's going to be an Earth orbit, big economic system, and that's been going on for a while. And then soon there'll be an Earth-Moon economic system, just like one more continent. Just like there's an America's Africa economic system, America's Europe or whatever, there'll be Earth-Moon economic system because the moon is a huge untapped geological resource.
Really? Lots of good stuff there?
We don't know. We've just barely... Right. Voltaire described Canada in the 1600s, I think, as a few acres of ice and rock.
Right.
Because that's how it looked on the map.
Right.
And that's how most people look at the moon. A few acres of gray dust. Why would we ever go there? And no one could live in Canada without technology. Nobody. You have to have fire. You need shelter. You need food preservation. You need all kinds of technology in order to be able to survive one winter in Canada. We just sort of take them for granted because they already existed. So what sort of technology do you need to live in Antarctica or in Earth orbit or on the surface of the moon? Are we at that moment in history yet? So that's where we're headed. And there's a lot of mysterious islands out there.
Oh, I'm excited. You're making me so excited. This is some of what you do. I kind of want to dive deeper in this, but you know what? In the interest of time, let me move to your second book because you just mentioned take 3 guys to the moon, let 2 of them hit the surface, and one of them stay back orbiting the moon. That person who was back orbiting the moon was Mr. Michael Collins.
Yeah, for Apollo 11 in the summer of '69. Yeah.
Right. And so your second formative book is Carrying the Fire, An Astronaut's Journey by Michael Collins, published in 1974 by Cooper Square Press. I'm holding the 50th anniversary edition. It was published just before the pandemic, actually, in 2019 by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux, if I said that right. Features an incredible foreword by Charles Lindbergh, who was the first solo pilot to cross the Atlantic Ocean and who died in 1974, which is the year the book came out. The cover is a black and white photo of Michael Collins. So this is not Neil Armstrong, not Buzz Aldrin, but the third guy that a lot of people, including myself, did not know the name of, really. Embarrassed to say, especially in front of you. In a helmetless spacesuit looking up at the sky with a rocket shooting up from the Earth in a faded blue background behind him. Across the top in a thick yellow Arial type of font, it says Carrying the Fire and Michael Collins. And the New York Times book blurb says on the cover, no other person who has flown in space has captured the experience so vividly. That was, of course, before Apollo Murders came out. Born in 1930 in Rome, Italy, died 2021 in Naples, Florida. Filed this one under 629.45 for astronauts in space travel / manned space flight. Chris, tell us about your relationship with Carrying the Fire, An Astronaut's Journeys, plural, by Michael Collins.
In the 60s, I was inspired by science fiction. All of the science fiction authors and Star Trek on TV and 2001: A Space Odyssey in the movie theaters. And it was hugely mind-expanding. I was a kid of, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. But then when I was 9 turning 10, Neil and Buzz walked on the moon while Mike was orbiting. And so at least given to me by the images on the television, suddenly there was a reality to my fiction.
Yeah.
There was a real thing that was happening that branched possibility with fantasy. And so that was really revelationary for me. Like, it's as if you've been reading X-Men comics and you go to an X-Men movie and you're thinking, wow, this is all cool. And then you come home that night and you look out the window and an X-Man flies by the window of your house and you go, I thought this was all pretend.
Wolverine scratching the glass.
You can actually, this is a real thing?
Yeah.
So if this is a real thing and real people are doing this, even more so than X-Men, because Neil and Mike and Buzz, they were just guys, you know. If they can do that, then maybe I could do that. And shortly thereafter, you know, when I was just 14, Mike wrote this book.
Right, 74.
And what's funny about it is I don't know who gave me the book. I don't know how I first came across it. And that happened twice in my life. Because when I was going through pilot training 15 years later, that book again showed up on my desk one day. I was going, who put this here? And no one could tell me who put this book here. And I was like, this is weird. Where did it? But anyway, I read it again when I was going through pilot training
appearing,
in my 20s.
and now it's on your kitchen table.
And now it's on my kitchen table. And when I first read it, when he wrote it, it was just incredibly permission giving, because he's an imperfect guy.
Yeah,
but he
says that a lot.
But he's, you know, he's reasonably like I am. You know, like he does. He's not a Superman. There's nothing special about him. He just gave himself some goals and then worked at it and used the best of his skills to put himself in a position to do those things. And I got to know him later, which was wonderful. He just passed away last spring. And so when I read it initially, early teens, it was sort of the continuing bridge between the fantasy world that I had been living in and the reality of what might be possible within my own life. And it was almost like a recipe book, a cookbook. This is what you do. And it's written beautifully poetically. It's why Lindbergh, you know, and his Spirit of St. Louis and everything, that's worth reading also. But Carrying the Fire, it's really thoughtful and introspective, like, you know, which a book like that ought to be. It shouldn't just be, you know, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Even the title of it, he didn't call it My Voyage to the Moon.
Right.
He called it Carrying the Fire, you know, which is so ancient and primal and human and real. And so when I read it, I just found it like an instruction manual, a potential instruction manual for life. You know, like imagine if you pick up a Jaguar, you know, for a car that you're dreaming of. Owner's manual. You haven't ever driven a Jaguar yet, but man, you read that owner's manual cover to cover going, okay, maybe someday I could do this. Well, I sort of saw the book that way. And then when I was going through pilot training many years later, reading it again, it was good because now I'd gotten a university degree and now I was into jet training. And it was like, okay, what did Mike run into at this stage of his life? So I found it really helpful.
Especially because there's a bunch of prefaces in the book that are like, he wrote one in 2009, he wrote another in 2019, like at age 70 he wrote it. And they kept all of them in the book. So you get this perspective also year after year after decade after decade as you start to read this book, which is really cool.
Yeah, and everybody should read that book, I think, especially if you have any sort of technical interest in your life, because it's a wonderful way of telling the story of Apollo 18, or I'm sorry, of Apollo 11, but so much more than that. You know, it's the story of that person and how they were one of the greatest explorers in human history, even though they would never have seen themselves that way. So yeah, it's a really good book. And Michael, he went on to, you know, do a bunch of things in business and was head of the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
And such a thoughtful, fun, witty, glint in his eye, you know, kind of person his whole life. Nothing but respect for Michael Collins, and really glad that he wrote Carrying the Fire.
Well, he is an incredible wordsmith. The book is really written very poetically. You mentioned the Charles Lindbergh introduction. Here's a quick quote from it, which also cues to the way you were talking about the title. Charles Lindbergh says, "You must have witnessed an Apollo event ascent to know the title's aptness. When a countdown at Cape Canaveral touches 0, you think the giant rocket will be consumed by bursting clouds of flame and thunder. Where I stood with astronauts 3 miles away from Apollo 11's pad, my chest was beaten and the ground shook as though bombs were falling nearby. Then a flame arose, left the ground behind, higher, faster, a meteor streaking through the sky. It seemed impossible for life to exist while carrying that ball of fire. Yet it does exist, as I saw later on a television screen that portrayed weightless men, countless instruments, and planet Earth through a window."
Yeah. Yeah, Lindbergh was not just a pilot either. Accomplished. He was an explorer and a really interesting person. And what a lovely link between, his early aviation experience, and now this early space exploration experience.
33.5 hour flight crossing the Atlantic Ocean. First person ever to do it by himself. 1927.
He'd already been up for 24 hours before that flight, and he fell asleep while he was crossing the Atlantic at one point. He drifted off to sleep. What woke him up was his airplane went into a spin, and it was the alternating light of the sunlight and the dark and the sunlight and the dark that woke him up before he crashed into the Atlantic in his little airplane. Pretty amazing feat for him to be the first to solo cross the Atlantic.
You mentioned Michael Collins died this year at age 90. I noticed he's born in 1930. And then I started looking up other astronauts. I got really interested. I'm like, okay, Frank Borman, Apollo 8, first time around the moon, born 1928. Alive today, 93. I'm like, Buzz Aldrin, born 1930, alive today, 91. Yeah. William Anderson, 88. James Lovell, 11. You seem to be doing pretty good for yourself, Chris. And I'm like, every one of your peers is like living to their 90s. Like, what is this astronaut? Like, how do astronauts take care of themselves? Is kind of what I'm picking at. What's the astronaut way of taking care of your body that seems to extend their life so long?
It's a little bit chicken and egg. In order to be selected as an astronaut, there was just an astronaut class hired just this week. And I went through, the average age of getting hired in that class was 37 to start. To walk in the door as a brand new baby, beginner, rookie astronaut. You're 37 years old.
Right.
So you've already established one or two patterns in your life. You've got ways of dealing with things. And one of them is you're healthy. We're not going to hire people that have let their bodies go or that aren't doing it because we're not going to be able to count on their bodies to work when they're a long way away from hospitals and doctors. So we need healthy people. And so most astronauts have way earlier in their lives established patterns that maintain health, fitness, diet, exercise, all those sort of things.
But can you zoom in on that for me? Fitness,
so for
diet,
me, Helena, my wife, told me a long time ago, she said, you lose weight in the kitchen and you get strong in the gym. Don't confuse the two. So I think it's obviously the two pairings. You need to regularly exercise your entire body, musculoskeletal and cardiovascular, and you don't have to be a fanatic about it. I mean, some people make the gym their life, and that's okay. But I'm not nearly that way. But I think it's important to get good.
What do you do at 6 a.m.? There's a quote from there's a quote from your book that you have about a 6 a.m. workout in the book.
So it depends what season I'm in and where I am. But I have a rowing machine in the basement. I have a treadmill and I have some free weights. And then I have one of those weightlifting machines as well. But typically I'll just row. And then, but you shouldn't just get your exercise in the gym. Always take the stairs. Always carry your bag. Walk if you can. Don't take the transport if you have the opportunity to walk. Walking through a forest is good for you in lots of different levels. Think about what you're breathing. That's where we're supposed to be. So
Phytonicides.
And just And I never allow myself to take a shower without doing push-ups beforehand. It's so simple. So I'm going to take a shower, do a bunch of push-ups first. I do 20 now. So 20, but just 20 deep, and you don't even have to think about it. It's like, okay, I'm going to take a shower. You do 20 deep push-ups. And I weigh myself every morning, but I don't fret over it. I'm just like, okay, what's my body weight today? Oh, I'm 3 or 4 pounds higher than I like. Okay, we'll just think about that. And then every time I put something in my mouth, I make a conscious decision about it. I'm going to eat this brownie or not. I'm going to eat this banana or not. I look in the fridge. Hey, I got a choice. It's one of the few things you actually can pretty largely control that's going to have a big impact on you and your health. So be deliberate in what you eat. And then think in the long term. Your body's going to change over time as you get older. And you want not just your body, but your brain to stay active. And so staying mentally engaged, staying motivated, being a student your whole life. If there's one unifying definition of an astronaut, it's a perpetual dissatisfaction with their own level of skill.
Ah, wow.
And so that's part of the reason I wrote the Apollo Murders. Here I am 60 or 61, and I say, I wonder if I can write a best-selling thriller fiction book. I wonder.
So you weren't happy to rest on your laurels, is what you're saying.
Why would you rest on your laurels?
Why would you rest?
Like, what's the next thing? No, you should rest, but you should take, rest doesn't just necessarily mean inaction. You should challenge yourself. Every day you should have stuff that you have challenged yourself with that you're looking forward to. Why not go through life like that? And I don't exercise every day, but I try and exercise enough, some cardio, some musculoskeletal, and then try and get all the little cheap exercise you can.
When you say musculoskeletal, you mean like weights.
Something that
you're flexing your biceps right now.
Something that moves all of your joints and loads up your skeleton. So, even on orbit, we had 2 hours a day of that, just so that you have a chance of having dense bones and strong muscles. So just do that, but stay mentally engaged. On the table here is the Sunday Crosswords as well.
Yeah,
every day,
New York Times Undercrossword Puzzle
when
book.
Helene and I have lunch together, we do a crossword over lunch and we're so different that I could never solve one by myself, and neither could she. But the two of us together, she knows something and I know something, and then it works. And there's a great celebration when we get every single one. But that mental engagement with your own life and always learning, it has never been easier to learn than it is right now. People begrudge the internet.
Yeah.
What an incredible resource
of
access to all the information of the world. And I mean, if you're not learning another language, then you need to kind of answer to yourself, why not? Or if you're not, try to learn new stuff, give yourself more tools to deal with the world. Anyway, so that's kind of a typical pattern.
You somehow take that insane level, I'm not saying, you somehow take that high level of curiosity, which I love, and that high level of aspiration towards that, but you don't let that burden you with any sort of anxiety about it.
No,
somehow.
you need to set your own measures of success. It's really important. Don't wait until someone else has told you that you've succeeded. I mean, that's nice. When CBC yesterday said The Apollo Murders is one of the best books of the year. That's great. But I didn't spend, years working on this book and then 9 months writing it and then 3 months editing it in the hope, hating the process, in the hopes that someday CBC Books would say, your book's good. I loved every single day of writing this book. I discovered and learned so many things. And I'm really proud of this book. And it's great that other people like it. And that's a lovely bonus. But if you hate the process of your own life and in hopes that someday someone will acknowledge something that gives, you're not going to be healthy. You're not going to be happy. So set the bar in a different place. Allow yourself to succeed every single day. Totally up to you whether you've succeeded or failed today. It really is. But we're not often kind of raised that way, and we burden people with bucket lists, like, oh, I got a bucket list. I need to windsurf in Bali, and I need to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and I need to zip line in Belize, and whatever. And you got this, and you're like that guy from A Christmas Carol,
People can't see you, but you're holding
Marley's
a weight.
ghost.
Yeah,
you're dragging this clanking weight around, and every time you look in it, you go, nope, haven't done any of those things yet. I'm a loser. Instead, give yourself little stuff that you can get done that you can celebrate. Or even if you wasn't in your list, go, wow, I did some cool stuff today. I made, I made some fried chicken for lunch today that, wow, I put a little bit of tarragon on there and a little bit of oregano, and that was delicious. And nobody else in the world could care at all. And you're not the world's greatest chef, but for you, that's a big victory. Hey, this is a cool thing. And take pleasure and delight in your own, as you know, happiness. And but anyway, so if you're looking at the astronauts that were just hired, or why Mike lived to be 90, and part of it is genetic, but a large part of it is just life choices.
And a beautiful mindset that you have on top of that, which is really helping guide you, which I love. And it's intoxicating to hear from. And the big part of the show is motivation. And a big part of a positive mindset is exactly what Hans Rosling is doing in your third and final book, which is Factfulness, 10 Reasons We Are Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. Published in 2018 by Flatiron Books. When asked simple questions about global trends, why the world's population is increasing, how many young women go to school, how many of us live in poverty, we systematically get the answers wrong. Here comes Professor of International Health and a man who can make data sing, as Hans Rosling offers a radical new explanation of why this happens. Chris, tell us about your relationship with Factfulness by Hans Rosling.
I first heard about Hans. He gave one of those public talks. I think it was a TED Talk.
Yeah.
And he's a compelling and kind of a quirky speaker, but quite compelling. But I started running across the stuff that was in Factfulness on the internet, and that I found it really contrary. Like, wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I had a different perception of the world. And then you start reading Factfulness, and it's like, hey, you remember your preconceived notions about Indonesia?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people in my circle of friends have been to Indonesia, but all of us know roughly where it is and have some idea, and we think we understand whatever, Indonesia, or choose your portion of the world.
Yeah.
What Hans does so beautifully is actually puts factfulness into your understanding of how the world is actually working. And one of the most funny things in it for me is he went to the big thing at Davos, where all those people get together.
Yeah.
And he does this little sort of parlor trick game of he just puts a map up of the world and says, this little figure represents 1 billion people. So where are the 7.5, if you say 8, because they're almost there, where are the 8 billion people of the world live? And those world leaders at Davos invariably
the World Economic Forum
misplaced at least 1 billion people. Often they misplaced 2 billion people. And these are the folks that are trying to make good decisions for the planet, and they don't even know where 2 billion of the people live because of the biases that they were raised with as kids. And he constantly keeps popping those little bubbles of preconceived inaccuracy, and it's so instructive. And he's very self-effacing, and he's working with his daughter and his son on this, and it's a beautifully factful book and really illuminating, and but also very hope-giving, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the negativity of what's going on. It's sort of comforting. But at the same time, it's self-destructive and really limiting. And so building your picture of the world based on factfulness and then reading the news, rather than letting however the news was skewed and hammered at you and letting that force your version of the world. I would much rather come at life from a position of factfulness, and that's why I find that book really worth reading and formative for me.
Well, you come at life from a position of factfulness. You come at a life from a position of so many incredible experiences. You share them through the lens and articulation of a teacher. Chris Hadfield, Commander Chris Hadfield, thank you so much for coming on 3 Books.
Neil, it's been great to talk with you. I very much appreciate all of the 8 books that you've written. I look forward to writing what you're writing next, or reading what you're writing next. And it's been a delight just to sit in my kitchen with you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, it is just me, just Neil again, hanging out on my basement couch, listening back to the conversation we just had with the wise Chris Hadfield. Thank you so much to Chris for coming on 3 Books and for giving us 3 more books to add to our top 1,000. If you are new here, you can always head on over to 3books.co/the top 1,000 and see a list of every single formative book we've ever discussed on the show. If you click any of those books, we take you to the Wikipedia page. We take you to the actual full text of the book in case the book is out of copyright. We take you to the publisher page or the author page of the book. We try to give you a way for you to check out the book, investigate it on your own, and then buy the book if you so want to from anywhere you want. We don't necessarily link over to any particular big retailer. We let you decide just to buy it if you want to buy it from somewhere you love, and we get no commissions or cuts or kickbacks of any kind. We just want to come up with the list. We just want the list. We want to do it for ourselves, as Chris would say. Thank you, Chris Hadfield, for adding 3 more books to our top 1,000, including number 724, The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne. That's Verne. Jules Verne, published almost 200 years ago. Can you believe that? Wonderful. The Mysterious Island. And number 723, Carrying the Fire, An Astronaut's Journeys by Michael Collins. A guy named Mike, as Chris Hadfield says. And number 722, Factfulness. That's Factfulness. Subtitle is 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think by Hans, Hans, Rosling, Rosling. Factfulness. By the way, the top blurb of this book says, one of the most important books I've ever read, an indispensable guide to thinking clearly about the world, from Bill Gates. Not too shabby. So we've got number 724, number 723, number 722, and we're going to kick off 2023. Huh? 2022. What year are we in? 2022 by continuing down our countdown. Oh my gosh, next year we're going to pass. We're going to get to the 600s. We're not even halfway. I think halfway would be number 500, and we're not even halfway yet. We got to look a couple years into the future till we even get halfway on this show. So many quotes jump out for me from this program, from this conversation. How about this one? Don't let somebody set your level of success. Simple as that. Intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Similar thing I was just talking about. Why do I have a list called the top 1,000? Why are we spending all this time like paying for hosting on a website, adding these links after every single show, making sure that those links go live right when the show goes live, fastidiously kind of working on it. We don't get any links. We don't get any associate payments. We don't get any kickbacks. The show's got no ads. The show's got no sponsors, just because this is the thing. The thing that we're doing is this thing. You might remember way back in chapter 1, I talked to Leslie about trying to make sure that the show always stays nonprofit so that I can keep focus on the thing I'm really doing. I can keep focus on that why, as Chris would said. Maybe that's the second quote. How about this? Start by asking, why am I writing this? I'll even broaden it out. Start by asking, why am I doing this? And don't just start by doing that. Do that throughout. There are books I have written and am writing where the why changes. I start because I got an itchy tooth as a landmass, I would say, back in chapter 10, for those that know that reference. I got an itchy tooth and I want to kind of scratch away at something, but then a year or two into it, the itchy tooth isn't itchy anymore. Should I keep going? Should I abandon the project? J.D. Salinger, who we've talked about a lot this year. Remember, we talked about him with Louis Sachar, and we're going to be talking about him in next chapter. I don't want to give it too much of a secret away, but we're going to be talking about him with Dan the Tailor in chapter 94 of the show. J.D. Salinger famously wrote for over a decade near the end of his life, and he didn't publish it. And he said writing without publishing was really gratifying because he didn't have to appeal to anybody. He didn't need the money. He didn't want the fame. He didn't want to be more recognized. He just wanted to do the work because he loved doing it. Ask yourself what your why is and keep checking in as you go. And the last thing, I guess there's two quotes kind of tied together. I was kind of pushing a little bit on kind of what makes our astronauts special psychologically. He said, every day you should have stuff that challenges you, / astronauts have a perpetual dissatisfaction with their own level of skill. I thought that was interesting because for me, when I think perpetual dissatisfaction, I think unhealthy. I think anxious. I think stressed. I think dissatisfaction doesn't sound pleasant. But the way he was framing it, and I can just see this, you can just feel the aura off of him with the smiles and the gestures and the passion. There's nothing stressful about writing this novel to him. There isn't. There wasn't. He just did it. He was dissatisfied with not being able to do it, so he figured out how to do it. He's dissatisfied with not being able to do it, so he goes ahead and does it. Astronauts have a perpetual dissatisfaction with their own level of skill. Maybe we all do. Maybe you do too. Maybe this is why we're hanging out now, more than an hour into this conversation, talking about how to live great, long, fulfilling lives, because we like the company, because we like each other's presence, because we feel each other's minds kind of working and spinning together, talking and thinking and chewing and processing all this stuff. And that's what we like to do because we want to live these tiny, short, infinitesimally small lives we have with the greatest possible fulfillment that we could possibly fill them with the most purpose and the most intention and the most connection and the most love. And we want to do that the best we can. So we go on this journey together and we figure it out as we go. Thank you so much to Chris Hadfield. Thank you so much to all of you for a wonderful conversation in Chapter 93 of 3 Books. And now, are you still here? Did you make it past a 3-second pause? If you did, I'd like to welcome you back to the end of the podcast club. This is the club where I talk directly to you. You talk directly to me. You call our phone number, which is 1-833-READ-A-LOT. You send us letters in the form of reviews over on iTunes, in the form of emails, in the form of comments on social media, whatever. You send us a letter of some kind. We read them. We play them back. We hang out. We talk. This is one of 3 clubs we have for 3 Books listeners, in addition to the Cover to Cover Club. Shout out to all those people listening to every single chapter of 3 Books and the Paper Cut Club. I can't tell you more about that club other than it's entirely analog and you got to call our phone number to figure out more. Okay? Speaking of that phone number, let's kick off the end of the podcast club like we always do. That's me smashing a pillow. Like we always do by going to the phones now.
Hey, Neil, this is Carol Jarka. I'm calling from Portland, Oregon. I'm halfway through the Chapter 48 podcast with Michael, and I just needed to call in. Following along with your format, here are 3 things. Number 1, Italo Calvino made the list. What a writer, what a storyteller. This really made my day. 2, yes, I organize my books by height. Only the best. 3, out in the world, it seems like you're probably got quite the presence and the following. However, in my mind, you'll always be just a good friend standing on my left, introducing me to another friend who's standing on my right, unless, of course, I've got my earbuds mixed up. Thank you for sharing the love of books and people with all of us. Bye for now.
Thank you so much to Carol from Portland, Oregon, for calling in to tell me that Italo Calvino was a lovely kind of connective tissue for you. Italo Calvino, of course, wrote If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. That was number 860 on our top 1,000. First mentioned back in chapter 48 by Michael Bungay Stanier, author of The Coaching Habit. And that chapter's title was Massive Moons and the Magic of Metaphor. Both things that also pretty perfectly kind of, I think you could describe to Chris Hadfield, right? Talking about lunar colonies, and he's wonderful with metaphors, as you heard, and as he does do in other things like his TED Talks. I remember once Chris Hadfield describes the existence on Earth, something like the skin on a pot of oatmeal that you left on your stove. Below us is endlessly bubbling lava. 15,000 feet above us, which isn't that high, is an atmosphere that we can't breathe. And yet somehow we're like a little bacteria in the corner. We have managed to propagate and survive. And I thought that astute metaphor of the skin on a pot of porridge, I think he called it a pot of porridge, not a pot of oatmeal on your stove, was wonderful. Now I'm trying to tie in other things together. Carol, organizing your book by height. Chapter 3, Seth Godin, call back, shout out. Seth Godin was the first person to talk about organizing book by height. I personally thought he was joking. I personally thought, what are you talking about, Seth? I personally thought, this is ridiculous, Seth. Although on one hand now I'm starting to see that different bookshelves have different heights available. If you try to organize like a big picture book or a big photography book or a big science book, it doesn't fit. So you put it sideways. Why don't you just take out a shelf? Take a shelf out of the Billy bookcase, right? Now you put all your big books at the bottom. Now what am I starting to do? Organize my books by height. Am I not doing that? Carol, I'm starting to see the wisdom in this idea. Thank you so much for the call. Okay, now let's head over to the letter of the chapter. This chapter's letter is a response from my monthly book club by Thuong Ngo. By the way, every single month I send out a monthly book club, which is a list of every single book I've read and recommended each month. If you go to neil.blog, neil.blog, click free newsletters, you'll get that if you'd like. Okay? Something like 40,000 people get that from me every month. Hi, Neil. I'm a member of this community, and I do feel strangely connected to you. I meant to email you numerous times to say thanks, but my extraordinary procrastination somehow got in the way. Yet late is better than never, and today I feel I must write you. I've wondered why I probably, or many of us probably feel connected to you, even though we have never met and probably will never meet. But how could I not? Every day, your awesome quote greets me with something bright and never fail. Every single day. Remind me of the human generosity and kindness emanating from such messages. You didn't have to do it, but somehow you did every day. It's not only the content of the message, but the persistence and diligence of the act that is so inspiring. Somehow just see email in my inbox that come from Neil, and even without reading it yet, give me the feeling that we are okay, that he is still here, still there, without fail being there, and not give up on the gratitude journey. And so I can't. How could not we? Although we never met, we heard of your life stories, your pains, your insecurity, your joys, triumphs, reflections, like we each all have. We heard of your childhood, first heartbreak, your mom's extraordinary talent and perseverance. Your close friend passed away and how you started the Book of Awesome. We heard of Leslie, your wife, what you learned about raising kids, your favorite bookstore. We read about the books that excites you, the poems that brought tears to your and then to our eyes, the speeches that inspired you and then us. We heard of your friends, the strangers that crossed your road and marked your days, etc. Somehow we know you, like you, love your thoughts, inspired by you, touched by you, cried with you, laughed with you, like we do with friend. So how could not we? I read The Little Prince and its first French book I've read. I still remember the fox said, "It's only with the heart that one can see rightly what essential is invisible to the eye." I read the poem On Children and reread it regularly to remind me that I must respect their different spirits. I have the attitude poster from The Happiness Equation in our dining room as a gift for my children and myself of how we can actually influence our happiness. You see, you are present in our life in many ways. Even though we have never met and probably never will, your books, emails, messages, podcasts somehow always bring a feeling of warm kindness, something cool I have never thought of, and an extraordinary reminder of the mightiness and perseverance of the human spirit. Your openness of your own vulnerabilities makes us feel close, as we all have them and can see ourselves in them, yet the courage to share about them at one awesomely inspiring. And it feels great to know that you are there, as you are, with not only great, kind, and cool thoughts, but also imperfections, ups and downs, and yet not give up on whatever challenge coming your way, and so shouldn't we. So thank you, Neil. I don't know you will have the time to read this among the millions messages you receive daily, but you know what? I write this for me also, to express my gratitude to you for being a stranger friend for many years. How awesome and paradoxical life is. Thuong. Thuong. Thuong, wow. Thank you. What a beautiful, touching email and message and letter. It's so wonderful to hear in so many ways. The Little Prince was the book I put on my book club last month. On Children was a poem that I emailed out. That's an excerpt from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And as you said at the end of your note, you do it for you as well. I do it for me as well. Like, we're all just sharing our stories. And when they touch each other, as I think our stories have many times this year, it feels good. It feels like we are part of something bigger than ourselves. It feels like our life isn't a 30,000 day blip of consciousness after millions of years of existence and before millions more of existence, but instead it's meaningful. It means something. It means something to us. We discover, we learn, we strive, we go through life together. Thank you for the journey. Thank you for the trip. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you on this ride. Okay, now let's head back to Chris Hadfield himself to close off the end of the podcast club with today's word of the chapter.
They use their own cunning and their own experience.
Yes, indeed, it is cunning.
Cunning.
That's cunning.
Cunning.
C-U-N-N-I-N-G, an adjective meaning number one, dexterous or crafty in the use of special resources, such as skill or knowledge, like a cunning plotter. Number two, characterized by wiliness and trickery, like cunning schemes. Those two you probably already knew, or maybe you knew some of it. Here's another two definitions that are a bit different. Prettily appealing, i.e. cute, like a cunning little kitten. And four, displaying keen insight, like a cunning observation. The word did not used to have the negative projections that it does today, wiliness and trickery. It just meant from the original word can, to can know something. In Old Norse in 1300s, it meant kunna, K-U-N-N-A, to know. It just means skillful, possessing knowledge. The present participle of konnen or kunnin, to know. Okay? Simply knowledge, knowing, understanding, and information. That has evolved to have negative connotations, but it doesn't have to. We can broaden and expand and stretch out the word cunning like a piece of pizza dough and use it more broadly in our lives. Thank you so much to Chris Hadfield for the incredible conversation in Chapter 93. Thank you, all of you, for this incredible year, and hang out with me over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to drop on the winter solstice. That's the right name of it, right? Winter solstice, the best of 2021. I am working on it now. It is taking a long time. Tuesday, December 1st at 10:58 a.m. We'll drop it like it's hot, and we can hang out over the holidays, reflecting back on this wonderful year that was. Until next time, remember that you are what you eat, and you are what you read. Keep turning the page, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Lock your Soyuz hatch and put your helmet on. 10. Ground control 9, to Major Tom. 8, 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2. Detach from from station, and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirts you wear. But it's time to guide the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I've left forevermore, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing left to do. Though I've flown 100,000 miles, I'm feeling very still. And before too long, I know it's time to go. Our commander comes down back to Earth and knows. Ground control to Major Tom, the time is near. There's not too